Y'all, I'm so excited for today's episode. I'm here with Quddus, who you may recognize from MTV's TRL back in the day. Him and Justin Timberlake both had the little curls about that stage of life. So this was back when I first moved to New York City. I got to meet Quddus. We have dear friends in common. We've been through lots of iterations in life, and we're going to be sharing today how he went from MTV's TRL to becoming a sound facilitator and training other people this incredible modality. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Bam.
You could have taken my job back in the day. We just needed a really candid beginning, so we worked that in.
Is this thing on?
It doesn't have to be you come to be a coach. You can come to learn the concepts. And if you want to become a coach, then we talk about it. Now it's about get the Condor approach information. And if it resonates with you to be a coach, then you can lean in. And we found that more people are interested because we've made that approach with it.
We live by the Condor approach. We use it with all our clients in every aspect, in one-on-one coaching, group coaching. All these concepts are real. They're everyday life.
So this is my third live event. I am so grateful for everyone here. And many of you have held space for me this week while I've worked through some kind of big things, actually some really big things. And I want to express so much love and gratitude to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
These tools, these concepts, these ways of understanding things made it so much easier for us then to navigate life. And as a coach, now you've got this really cool process and procedures you can tell people.
I guess I just want to stress, if coming from somebody that has benefited through teachers like you guys, how desperately you're needed. How desperately you're needed. And to keep pushing your voice out there to find people like me.
My wife is here and my kids are here and my business is taking off again. And my clients are building their bodies and creating relationships from a place of self-love and from a place of they're already good enough, because I am teaching them how to do that, because that's what I'm doing now. I can't even express the gratitude that I have for Tom and Cole. They're not just my coaches. They're not just my mentors. They're my fucking friends.
Here we're teaching you how to be independent and interdependent. You know how to be your number one emergency contact, and then you have a backup plan, not only of condors and people that know these concepts, but people you can rely on. And it's not me and Ta. It's an entire community and ecosystem that's committed to your growth.
I did not have safety in my body. I did not have safety in community. I did not have safety in my home. And you guys literally changed our lives. And the amount of safety that we have now to be able to create and go from victim to creator is my story. And this is the first time, like, I used to have panic attacks. I could not speak on this microphone. I don't even know who I am right now.
I'm really happy to just see how the sequence of events keep unfolding in my religion, and I appreciate all the acceptance of me and my stuff. And I do notice that I'm not as triggering as I am sometimes, and that was really triggering to me. It was just like watching how I'm just really not even in the mix of a lot of stuff, because I like to get in the mix. I'm really proud to be up on the stage with these dope folks. This is what wild ancestors look like. It's ancestors back here in the back doing the happy dance. They damn dropping it like it's hot. You know what I'm saying? All of that. So thank y'all, appreciate it.
Thank you. The Condor approach actually isn't about psychedelics at all. It's about any big life change. That could be having a baby. If you're a first-time parent, everything changes. It could be you just left a job, or you're thinking about leaving a job and you feel all the physical sensations of that. Like, how do you work with that? How do you make the right decision at the right time? That's what the Condor approach is going to help you do. Meet you where you are, get clear in the path of getting there with the least collateral damage, the most effective and the most efficient way, so that you can actually arrive on time. I think that this time though, there was so many people that were sharing breakthroughs in real time that could process it differently. It's like they could observe themselves in something from the outside of it and still allow the emotions. And I thought that was super cool to see them kind of like coaching themselves in real time with tools they just learned so they could actually understand how it works. So, Quddus, we're just going to jump into the episode because I feel like it is impossible to try to quantify who Quddus has been. And some people might remember, some people might not. Let's start from the period of your life when we met.
Yeah.
And then let's just get into juicy stories of how you go from MTV to doing sound facilitation in a very shamanic way.
Yeah. Brooklyn is where it all started. And it was this grimy ass apartment building that we both found ourselves hanging in. And of course, we had this really great crew of humans in that building, including a couple friends, Kosh. Danny lived upstairs, John Zay, my old friend from Canada, Sean, and we all hung out in Williamsburg back before the gentrification of it.
We weren't in the cool kids club over it. We were second stop Lorimer. It wasn't cool back then.
It was not. Now they got Starbuckses and the Gap and all the things. But yeah, it was definitely a really good time. That was a whole nother lifetime ago, though. You saying MTV to what I'm doing now truly does feel like a different lifetime. I can somewhat relate to that young man, that version of me who was passionate about music. And that's why I ended up on MTV, because I was really passionate about music. And I didn't have the words for this at the time, but I did have the feeling that music could be medicine. And it was for me. And that's what had me so passionate about talking about it for the rest of my life. That's what I thought I was going to be doing when I started at MTV. I really thought this is my dream job. And of course, when you encounter different tools for the same theory of change, any person who's sane will pick up the new tools and start using those. So that's a shortcut to get to where we are now, is the fact that as a DJ, before I was a VJ on MTV, I always used to love playing a record and seeing the crowd light up. And in that moment, I knew I was having an impact of some sort. And now I just have better tools to make a deeper impact. And it's so fulfilling.
It's like especially when it comes to like sound practitioners now, most, like I look back at the music of the 90s, the way the love songs were done, the way that the hip hop was done, there's so much feeling, like the emo, the like grunge, and so much of that painted my emotional landscape in a way that I couldn't express or articulate, that it makes sense. So many of us ended up in what I call like the healing arts, because we were like emo kids who couldn't express their feelings, didn't even know. It was just a time that you didn't really share your feelings.
Yeah.
You just close the door, cry to a good Brandy song or something, and then buck up and get back out in the world.
100%. I think most of us have had the experience of being raised by parents who weren't necessarily equipped to deal with our emotions. And what do most parents do? They tell the kid to be quiet. Yeah. And that has a huge impact, because then on some subconscious level, we make up that we can't actually express our feelings and be safe to do so. And so we repress our feelings, and then we wonder why we're bottled up and feeling anxious or depressed or whatever it is, right? And so I always say with my sound meditation work, the point is to feel our feelings, actually. And what the harmonics of these instruments provide us is a soundscape to actually do that. And I remember when I first heard the gong, there were tones that were coming out of it that tapped into parts of my psyche that I had not even dared to touch. And those were the parts that were laying in the shadows that needed to be seen and felt. And so it's profound to be able to facilitate this work now and see that time and time again, people tell me all the time that after these sessions, they didn't even realize they needed what they experienced. There are no words for these types of experiences, actually. Words are like an attempt to convey emotion, but they don't really ever get there.
Especially the English language is super limited.
Yeah.
And even when the tones and things that you get exposed to, when especially more of the sound healing space, more of the Middle Eastern instruments, instruments from India, they have tones that 20 years ago, I would not have even liked. Like, they weren't pleasing to my ear, but I think part of that is because they made me feel things I didn't want to feel, or like trigger some aspect of myself that I was like really trying to bury away. And I love seeing the transition with celebrities as well that 20 years ago are starting to get more into this healing space. And it's like watching different members of Beyonce's team and people even that are putting out records now of healing music. So what do you think that is that so many folks from, say, 20 years ago, late 90s, we had this pop explosion, right? So you went to New York City for TRL, I went there because I got signed by Larry Rudolph, who managed Britney Spears, his assistant. So that's how I ended up meeting you. Is she got me a hookup to go see TRL, because that's the cool thing. I just moved to New York City, living between 45th, or on 45th between 8th and 9th, so I was around the corner. And to look back at that time and see like the also explosion of pop and then the breakdown of pop and the whole shift of the industry, there was just a lot of, it wasn't very guided by authenticity in any way.
Yeah, it was totally manufactured in a lot of cases.
100%.
We were actually looking at boy bands that were crafted with all sorts of executives who strategized, and the opposite of authenticity in a lot of ways. And of course, there was something authentic inside of that, because there was actual talent in a lot of these boy bands, and certain songwriters knew how to tap into certain parts of the human condition and great songs. And so I don't look back at that and have any sort of, ugh, God, pop. Like, it had its place. It had its time and place. And I think we're just in a different time and place. We're exposed to more of humanity with social media. We used to be relegated to whatever the big media companies wanted to show us. And now we've seen all sorts of things because of social media. And I think the pandemic specifically really was this inflection point, understanding our humanity on a different level, because people were getting more vulnerable on social media, talking about their mental health. Mental health was not a conversation about 10 years ago. You would have shame and stigma about going to a therapist before. Now it's trendy. Talk about your therapist.
Totally.
You know? So I just love these inflection points in civilization where we can actually see our evolution in real time. And I feel like being able to come to a sound meditation and experience this in the context of self-development, self-growth, self-actualization, and in not being some woo-woo thing that's a fringe thing that people don't understand and you wouldn't be able to tell your mom about what you did that day. I just love how we have evolved to the point where it is actually really cool to think about how to develop yourself.
And I think that, like you said, there was something in 2020 that forced people to confront things because they couldn't run anymore.
Yeah.
They literally couldn't leave their house or the problems in it.
Yeah.
And so then it was just a big confrontation that forced a lot of people to either look or just completely freak out.
Yeah.
And so let's go to your transition from VJ, pop culture, and I would say this narrative of the U.S., really of most of the 90s and early 2000s up to 2005-ish. How do you go from that pop culture, like overproduced everything, to end up now you're doing these sound sessions and facilitation and working with people to really work with their spiritual bodies, whether through plant medicines and psychedelics or sound? It is a shamanic perspective. So walk me through, how does this even happen? Go from like VJ to behind the altar.
It definitely did not come in a straight line. I was very confused about what was going on for a lot of the years that I was in this transition, and wondering about why I felt like it was time for me to leave MTV. And the thing is, for me, it was all about the music. And that time, MTV was getting more and more away from the music and more into the reality shows. And so I felt like it was less and less the culture that had me excited about the job in the first place. And so when I started interviewing reality show stars more than the Stevie Wonders and the Jay-Z's and the Justin Timberlakes,
Like the Tila Tequilas?
Exactly.
Totally.
I actually distinctly remember turning down a few of the interviews my producers wanted me to do, precisely because I was a DJ before any of this. So for me, it was like, nah, that ain't it. For me, you can get another VJ to do that interview and it'll probably be better because they'll be excited about it. For me, it's always been about the music. And so that was what was going on in the building then. And so I decided to leave. And at the time, MySpace was doing some really interesting things in platforming artists. And I really believed in what they were doing. And we had some conversations as I was transitioning out of MTV, and I went over to MySpace and I decided to help them as a creative director. I was advising their record label that they were starting with Interscope as a partner. And that was an experience of getting more on the other side of the music. So whereas MTV was about the distribution of it and the popularization of it, I really wanted to get behind the scenes to be at the genesis of it, because that for me was way more creatively interesting and dynamic. And so that's what I did for about 5 years. I was helping developing artists. I did everything from doing their music videos as a director to managing some of their tours. It was a really interesting way to experienced basically every cog in the wheel of the music industry. And then I got sick of the music industry. I just thought it was so dysfunctional. And it was like the new plantation, you know, these deals that artists were getting and the way that we talked about these artists behind the scenes as these commodities to be just dealt with in a pretty inhumane, thoughtless way. I remember being in a A&R meeting, Interscope, and I played this brilliant rap artist at the time named Blue for the room, and there was one particular A&R who was the head of the department, and one of his nicknames was Dr. No, because he just would just say no to these artists who we would play as a passionate A&R department, and he could just do that with such a cold, lifeless way of being. And I just got sick of it, because there I was as a purist wanting to platform an artist who I thought was brilliant, and just looking around the room and feeling like these weren't my people. And I just said, this ain't it either. And I didn't know what was next, but I remember getting back into some broadcasting stuff. I did a project with AOL. I did a project with YouTube. I was helping to basically create new media as we know it now. And that was also not particularly fulfilling. And so I ended up having a moment where I was really humbled, and also had a breakup with a partner at the time. And then a dear friend of mine, Preston, happened to be in my living room. And I was telling him how these things just didn't feel right. And I was just not feeling fulfilled. And I was really actually not happy. I was feeling anxious because I didn't know what was going on. And then he invited me to a workshop. And it was something that had just really impacted him. And he was a dear friend. So I thought, you know what, let me try it out. Definitely a very profound experience to be in such an intentional environment where we had a facilitator who deeply cared about people. And I got that about them. So even though some of the environment, some of the jargon was a little bit off for me, I would sit through these workshops with these different facilitators, one after the other, who would dig deeper and deeper and deeper into some of these layers of my existence that were not really conscious to me, actually. I was not aware of some of the things that were operating, like the reason why I didn't just pick up an instrument. And for all these years, I had a limited belief that I had something wrong with me, like I was fundamentally broken on some level. And that was from something that happened in my childhood, my father. And so this workshop series helped to bring up a lot of things to the conscious mind that I needed to look at and really reassess in a new set of values that I could actually craft from scratch, not from some history. And that work led me to being open to exploring the psychedelic realm and doing work with a dear friend of ours who is serving as an incredible shaman. And that was profound. That first experience with John was absolutely profound. I'd never heard music quite like I heard it that day. And that's really the bridge from my life as a DJ through to a VJ, through to now a sound practitioner, was really that experience, actually, and feeling so intimately connected to the tones and the harmonics that were involved with that experience that it lit something up in my soul that really had been a little bit decayed over time. And that was the seed to now what is my life. I still wasn't really sure that I could pick up an instrument and do what I'm doing now, but it was the beginnings of it. I remember sitting there after the experience and looking at John and actually having the first thought like this. I'd never seen another man who I actually wanted to be mentored by. I had that distinct thought, but I didn't know how that would work. So I didn't actually bring it up that day. But then lo and behold, about 5 years later, I was going through a divorce, and there I am talking to him, and he's inviting me into a microdosing protocol, and then he's inviting me into a shamanic training, and then I'm getting invited to a sound experience.
At what point were you kind of like,
the whole way.
When someone's trying to shift gears and it's jerking because they're just not. For the kids that don't know, they used to have cars that were manual. You had to change gears.
Yeah, it was definitely that. I felt like there was so much of my driver in life that was predicated on some kind of need to prove. I felt like if I didn't achieve society's definition of success, which had been pop culture, I didn't think I was worthy. I felt because of my relationship with my father not being around as much, I made up at some point in my childhood that I wasn't really worthy. I couldn't get attention from my father, how would I be worthy? So that was really a driver that I had to dissolve over time and get to the point where it wasn't about proving myself. It was really then about serving people and making a difference and leaving the world better than I found it. So there I was, encountering the thing that had woken a lot up in me and made the biggest difference for me. And so, of course, when John invites me to do shamanic training, I'm not necessarily jumping at it because I don't really even know the path to success within that. It was a great experience, but like, how am I going to take this on? I don't really know this work.
Which toolbox does this go in with my current skill sets?
Yeah. And it was this beautiful sequence of having that training and then going to sound school and being trained by two of the best sound practitioners in the world. And it all lined up in this amazingly divine way where level 1 of sound school happened right before level 2, which didn't always happen in that particular sound school. So I happened to be part of this class that had the benefit of that sort of momentum going from one level to another. And then these two teachers who were the stewards of this sound school decided to break up after level 2. So I was the last class that got to experience them both pouring into a class. And it was such a beautiful transmission. Those two working together, it's Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. And so I was so blessed to have that kind of training. It was all those workshops, then developing as a facilitator of those workshops, then getting the shamanic training, then getting sound school in this way that I couldn't have scripted better. It was the very best training I could have asked for. And I think I needed it. I needed every bit of that level of excellence and professionalism and precision and power that all those facilitators poured into me to be able to do it at the level that I feel like I need to do everything in life. I think the benefit of being born of a Haitian immigrant who did have some things that were challenging about being raised by him, but man, he was a hell of a dentist. And he showed me what it looked like to have a work ethic and be really great at what you do. My mother too, world-class educator. And so I was born of two people who poured so much into their professions. And so it just created a standard of excellence that I had to live into in every way, shape, and form. And these are not linear things to do with your life. And so I looked at this nonlinear thing, and it was really hard for that part of me that wants to refine and perfect and be so damn good at something to understand how to be that in this. It just doesn't work like that. So I really had to dissolve that part of me on some level and play jazz, where I had been in pop culture and knew how rap lyrics went like this in a certain cadence. And then you got your verse, you got your chorus, you got your verse, you got your chorus. All of a sudden, it's like there's no map actually to consciousness unfolding in front of you as you're facilitating these experiences. So it was incredible. It was the most magical thing, and also daunting and terrifying, and flipped me upside down. And I thought I was going insane at one point. People around me thought I might be going a little loopy.
And to be fair, that's sometimes what it takes for us to end up in the new place. It's like a rip current of consciousness. You get grabbed, pulled out to another place, and you can't fight it. The more you fight it, the crazier you feel, and the more likely you'll drown in it. And it's at that point, what was it? How do you find your grounding? Because what I'm hearing in your story and what I kept seeing is like a surfboard. But it's like you had these constructs and structures that helped you be high performing and show up and be reliable and make it where people want to hire you. And those all have very functional gifts within them. But then there's limitations, right? Because then you also have to be able to surf in a wave. Otherwise, that rigidity and control becomes hypervigilance and restlessness and sleeplessness.
That's it.
So walk me through, because I think a lot of people can relate to, that a lot of our audience is high performers that end up hitting a wall in that, their health, their wealth, their relationships. So what was it that allowed you to even surrender to the wave a little bit, to trust, or even start to even really understand what that means?
It didn't come easy. It came really violently. For me, I had a really challenging moment when I was facilitating workshops with my now ex-wife, and we were training some of the most influential people in the world to be even
They were
more,
amazing. I went to one of them.
Yeah, you were in one of them. And so we were operating at a certain level that I was actually having a hard time keeping up with, given that there were some personal things that I hadn't tended to either, which led to my divorce. Really getting aligned about what it is that I really needed to do in myself before I even stepped into the arena of marriage was really love myself. And then, of course, alignment and a compatible partner comes with that. But it all came to a head, basically, when I was in Brooklyn and not sleeping for days at a time. And this came after my dog, who I loved, Michi. We were on a walk, and a bigger dog came up to Michi. I thought they were going to play. It seemed fine. And then next thing you know, the bigger dog bites Michi, and he's dead. And that was such a significant moment, and it rattled my system. Pick up my dead dog and run it to the nearby vet, and it was all so traumatic. And all these days of sleeplessness ensued. And one night, it was 4 a.m., insomniatic again. I thought, you know what? Let me smoke a little indigo, see if that will help, right? Instead, I literally fell on my head, and I didn't black out. I realized, wow, I just fell on my head. I looked up around. My ex-wife, Carmina, she's in the next room screaming, "Baby, are you okay?" And that was one of those moments. It's like Arianna Huffington talks about the moment she woke up in her office with blood all over the floor. That was my moment. And so that was the moment I realized there was something really off. I am definitely resisting something. There's something not aligned. There's something not in flow. I'm not surfing the wave. And so, of course, months of struggling, grappling with what was underneath all of that, and finally getting to that gold, which was really the truth that I needed a divorce, and I needed to break up with Carmina, move on from Camera Ready and what we had built with that, and really go deeper in whatever was going to come next. But I had no idea. So there was this void space during the pandemic where I was really left with just speculation. I didn't know. I'd left this training company, and we had all these great graduates like you that spoke to something working there. And so I really needed to decipher what was that about that experience that was so fulfilling and powerful and transformative, that lit me up, brought something else online for me. And it is important to be able to distinguish one thing from another. Like, it wasn't necessarily that it was camera ready. It was what we were doing. And
the people that you attract. It makes such a difference who's in the room when people say set and setting with psychedelics, any transformational environment.
Yeah, that's it. And it was an alchemy that was really shamanic, actually. There was someone that came up to me after one of those workshops, and he said, "I know this on paper is a media training, but what you're doing is shamanic." And I took that in, but I didn't really take that in. It was like a seed. And then sure enough, throughout the pandemic, I definitely just fell to my knees and took long walks in Boulder and really, really tried to listen to what life was wanting to bring to me. And it just so happened that John was really the one who, in the midst of all of that doubting and debating what I should do next, he really just helped me to just get back to my true nature and really tap in. I remember I was in another relationship, the next relationship after my divorce, and I was struggling with whether that was actually it too. And he just straight up asked me, "Is she your soulmate?" He would ask me questions like that, where it was just deeper, go deeper. That was basically like the theme. It was always like,
it's nice, it's fine. But...
Yeah. And it was that kind of question, that kind of energy that I got from John that basically elevated me to realize, okay, there is something to what he's doing that's different than any of the coaching I'd done, any of the workshops I'd done, and even some of the ceremonies I had done. They weren't getting to this kind of level. He was speaking with a certain kind of vibration and frequency and just penetrating through all these veils. And so I said yes when he invited me to the shamanic training. And we all need good mentorship when we're going through these different valleys and these questions. We don't know what we don't know. We have blind spots. And I certainly had a lot of blind spots about how still this like programming that I'd experienced, this need to be so perfect in the face of a pretty chaotic home, to try to be good enough to warrant attention or love,
significance, all of it.
All of that. And then ultimately, I got down to the really brass tacks of who I am in the process of doing this shamanic training and witnessing miracles and just feeling, wow, okay, if I'm in the proximity of this work and I'm feeling very moved by it, and now the sound school is in front of me, I also didn't know whether I could do that, but I leaned in enough. I was terrified of going to sound school and embarrassing myself and fumbling these instruments. I had all the freaking imposter syndrome you could possibly imagine, even if I was in music for 24 years at that point. It was really something to just trust. It was like spirit, that whisper over and over again, and sometimes getting louder and louder in the form of a John saying, hey, are you in your head right now? And so, yeah, it was just this really beautiful journey of getting the right mentors at the right time and trusting just enough in what was unseen.
That's where I think we're in another growth period in this like shamanic spiritual space, because there's also been a lot of what people call charlatan or overnight shamans stepping in to be, you know, putting out their programs and their course materials and their regurgitations of product. And you see it in the music industry. You see it in every industry, the people that come in and try to model the model without having the actual practice hours, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like they're I feel, or I'm at least witnessing a sense of a bit of a contraction of trust, because people don't know what they're reading online.
Yeah.
And the fabrication of technology can make it even trickier to know what to trust, because you're seeing it with your eyes. It's like that energy component is so important. But if someone doesn't have that at least level of self-trust, then who they're going to put as their mentor and support can be just the most expensive, because they must be the best quality, which is not the case. So how have you, in stepping into this space, and you've had, it's like John's been in a coaching shamanic space for 25 years, right? Or at least coaching in totality, and then shamanic for a long time as well.
Yeah.
He was a part of our wedding at Machu Picchu in Peru, me and Ta. So there's all these connections. But what are you as a practitioner stepping into? What is integrity in this space to you? What is creating a clear container, or some would say sacred? Like for me, it's all sacred, but we have to still delineate the difference between, we're going to create a container for this healing environment, right? This safe space or whatever. So walk me through like your thought process in working through imposter syndrome. Now you're stepping into this shamanic role. Like how does all that transfer? How do you reconcile it? Anything around authenticity and shamanism?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the biggest takeaways from my shamanic training was about being in right relationship. To me, that's the headline on it. And being in right relationship means with yourself, with others, in your life, with your finances, everything, right? Like that, to me, sets a different kind of table for someone coming into my space as a facilitator, because I'm working on myself diligently. I am never going to facilitate for people in any way, shape, or form if I am not asking the same of myself. You know?
It's a devotion, this path.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. To be devoted on many levels, right? Like devoted to being my best self, but also really serving others to be their best self. And it's a vow, it's an oath. Like for me, that's the thing that distinguishes a lot of different practitioners is, what is your lineage? What promises have you made? Who has trained you? And what does this mean to you? Really, is it a source of income? Is it trendy and it's just the new cool? Or is it in your heart? Is it in your soul? Is it your dharma? And the fact is, I could have made a heck of a lot more money continuing in the business that I was in. And that's never been my metric for success. And so integrity and authenticity, I think, is really predicated on really defining your values and then understanding them every day, how to apply them every day so that you can show up in front of people and actually be who you say you are, and also not need anything from them. I don't need anything from the people that I facilitate. Sometimes I just let people come sit with me, even if they don't have money to pay for the experience, because I know they need it. I've done that many times. For me, it's way bigger than anything on earth. This is what I was put here for. So there's just different levels of engagement with everything, every profession. But this happens to be something that people really trust. They put a lot of their hope into, and I don't take that lightly. I've been in that place. I've been feeling broken and turned myself over to somebody who had the confidence to say that they could help me, and they did. And I will never forget that. So for me, it's paying it forward. That's really it.
And I know a lot of people that listen to this show are, because this is a psychedelic coach, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are hearing a call and they've got that imposter thing in the shamanic space, like I shouldn't charge or I can't charge. So what has been your thought process with this? Because I always say there's nothing woke about being broke. You have to also look at your relationship to money, because that is also a trauma response. People's traumas show up in their money, their finance, their ancestral woundings. It's another part of the work, and you don't have to choose money or service. It's how can my money serve us? Not just me, but like in totality.
That's good.
So can you share to someone listening that's stepping into this and they are feeling that imposter syndrome? Maybe they saw a sound healing training or they saw something, but it's, but who am I to do this? Who am I to make this jump or this commitment?
Yeah, and on some level, that's actually a healthy thought. I actually want people to deeply doubt their ability to do this work. I did.
Arrogance concerns me when I see people over arrogant.
The fact is, I had done years of training, being trained to train in a very, very high performing workshop before I did a shamanic training. And then I did that before I did sound school. And so for me, those years of being developed as a facilitator had everything to do with my confidence to even step in the arena for shamanic training. And then, of course, for sound school to then propel me into what I'm doing now. If I hadn't had those steps, I don't know if I would have actually jumped in this arena. I didn't skip any steps. So I really do believe in proper training and development. And maybe there is someone listening that feels that way because they need more development. And so there is this distinction between imposter syndrome and just not being ready.
Not having the skill. There is skill sets with this thing. Like for you in a sound perspective, you can have people have very deep things come up, and if you don't know what to do, it can actually support a harm moment versus 100%. A healing moment.
100%.
And knowing, we call it a what happens when plan. If you don't have some, not confidence you have all the answers, but you are confident that you have some skills that if something happens, which it will, do I know what to do? Do I know how to handle this? And so you went through the facilitation, because at Camera Ready, it was deeply pushing on people's imposter fear, being seen, their storytelling, their like deep vulnerable aspects of the self of how do you operate in vulnerability without trauma dumping? There's so many components to it. So what do you say if you were talking to Quddus, even let's say it's 2018, which I think is when I went to Camera Ready Experience, and you're in this facilitator role, and there's the parts that are fulfilling, and then there's the parts that aren't. If you were to sit with yourself at that time, and that version of you sat in the chair like we're sitting right now, and like I even started saying my infinite self instead of my higher self or best self, because I think I'm always in my best self. This is as good as it gets, for better, for worse. So in that, the version that you are now and channeling that future self, infinite self, talking to Quddus 2018, what would you say to you if you sat in this very room about where he was and what's working, and like to pour into your own heart at that point?
Wow, I would say you're doing great. And you may not understand everything that's going on and why it's going on, but you're doing great. Really, I was on track, and I've always been on track, but I haven't felt it. I've been trusting enough to take the next step, but also experiencing massive levels of doubt and all that. So I would just say, yeah, you're doing great. Keep walking the path. These dots will connect, and they have. Now looking back, I think it was Steve Jobs that said that things only make sense when you're looking back, or something. I'm mangling the quote, but basically, the fact is I was taking steps to walk away and wean from the crack cocaine of all of that fame and money and all of that. And it did feel like it was counter to so much of what the culture and society deem as success. But I knew that I was meant for something else, something deeper, and that was the next iteration, was Camera Ready, where it made sense. I was bridging the self-development that I had learned how to facilitate and the media space that I had been a part of, and so when I look at it, it was like the perfect next step. And so I definitely would just be affirming to that younger version. I was being very, very critical inside of myself around, maybe where I should be, even if the impact that we were having with Camera Ready was tremendous. I'm looking at a lot of the graduates like yourself, like thriving and on camera, absolutely the standard for authenticity now. And we did good work. And I'd also say trust yourself more in terms of what you're feeling around your personal life, and the things that seem incongruent probably are. So it was a layer cake of things going on. And I think that a lot of things can be true at once. I think that there's complexity to most people, and also the beauty and simplicity is there too. There is a feeling, a knowingness, and that's really what I would point to for that younger version of me, is trust that deeper feeling you're having, because some things may seem some way on paper, but if your soul ain't really feeling it, then it ain't sustainable. And that goes for my marriage. There was something about it that was really, on paper, really what seemed like a storybook kind of thing. Both of us were facilitators of similar work, and we were even being mentored by the same facilitator at one point, and we both had a passion for this thing that we developed into this workshop series called Camera Ready, and it wasn't really what ultimately I could feel authentic in moving forward. Yeah, it's listening deeper. We got to listen deeper in life. That's the thing.
I think that's the trickiest part, is first even allowing yourself to feel that there is discontent. There's almost like this, I'm too privileged to question. I'm lucky. This should be good enough, because there's this narrative of, am I chasing that it's never going to be good enough and I'm not being content? Or is it that this isn't correct? Because there's this beautiful thing that happens on this path where at first you say no to things that really don't function for you. You're like, okay, I acknowledge this is harm causing. Then we start to say no to things that are more neutral. Then we start having to say no to things we like. Then you start saying no to things you love, because there's the dharma, the path, what you're meant to do, what you feel is actually like this deeper mission. And for me, I don't believe that everyone has a purpose, but I believe that you can create tremendous purpose out of everything that happens to make it purpose-filled. And so now with what you're doing, walk us through, what is life like for Quddus now? Like, where are you? What are you doing? What does life look like, feel, sound like for you?
Sound has been the most incredible thing to get into, and I've been facilitating sound meditation and sound and psychedelic experiences all around the world for now 2 years, and now it's brought me to Amsterdam. I had a tour through Europe last summer and was really, really blown away by a human out there eventually when I went back to Amsterdam and fell in love. And so now I'm living in Amsterdam and I'm in this amazing new relationship, and just launched Sound Sanctuary Academy so that other people could explore this path in sound and have these tools, even if it's just for themselves at home. And it's really been amazing to see just what happens when we work with these instruments in more of an intentional way, the kind of healing that they can facilitate. It is a dance between the properties of these instruments and how we engage. The way we've listened to music historically, what do we do when we listen to music mostly, right? We're working out, we're driving, we're dancing. Maybe some of us sit there and actually close our eyes and optimize the auditory cortex to really take in as much information as we can and really soak up the whole benefit of it. But even still, we're listening to something that is compressed and doesn't have the same quality of frequency and vibration as an instrument live. And then we get to look at the instruments that we use for these different experiences. And so when you get into what an overtone instrument provides in the way of harmonics and what the harmonic series is in all of the universe, including ourselves, then you get into looking at what is the most powerful tool to actually render our best self. And so I'm just so thrilled that I've come across this modality and that I've gotten this mentorship, and now that I'm paying it forward, and the Academy, it's just been the most incredible thing to finally land in what makes sense of this whole journey we just talked about.
We're not even scratching like a fraction of the surface of the intricacies of it all and the timelines and the timings.
Yeah.
So often people will come into a shamanic path thinking that they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as if everything that happened in pop culture wouldn't apply to shamanism, when really it is creating that binary perspective of what is fabrication, what is authenticity, what is a blend, the gift of that, and that we don't just throw out technology or mainstream to go to a hill to live in Tibet, because then we abandon and we just create a deeper bifurcation or like separation of spirituality versus an integration of what it is to be devoted to the path of, for me, it's increasing my capacity to feel it all, sometimes all at once. Not to try to stay in what most call positive emotions, but just to understand. And then to build tolerance with other people's processes so that I can accept their process without having to make it mine or offend mine.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to be in the acceptance of the human condition and all of its iterations. And it's really, really something to access compassion and curiosity more than everything, because we're all going through it on some level. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. This is a very sobering path to walk, considering where we're from.
100%. And especially like in witnessing celebrity, whether in New York City or Los Angeles specifically, to watch the suffering that happens behind the scenes. Like I tell people, the only difference between, some of the folks I've worked with that don't have any resources as far as money and people that have lots of financial resources, one is crying on the linoleum floor of their bathroom and the other's on marble, but that the suffering is the same. Everyone is 0 to 10 in their suffering. And it's, of course, there is a poverty line limit to it where everything changes. But most people's suffering, it's like they either don't allow themselves to feel the suffering because they feel they don't deserve it because of some privilege, or they only suffer in comparison to what they've seen as other possibilities, and they're limiting their own ideas of what's possible.
100%.
So for you, what message would you like to impart as we kind of wrap today's episode? And we'll do a future one. Next time you come to Austin, we're going to do this again.
Hey.
Because there's so many other places I want to be able to explore with you. What message would you impart on people today? Just whatever's on your heart or what we've talked about so far that you would love to leave with people.
Wow. There's a lot to say, but also it really comes down to the way we listen determines how we live. I think a lot of people are missing it when God actually answers. A lot of people praying, not a lot of people listening. That's really the big thing. I had to listen deeper. I was praying, but I had to listen deeper. And also thinking about what we listen to, like how we listen. And this is why I love sound meditation, is the way that I orient to life now, because it is a frequency game. Nikola Tesla talked about how if you really want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And when you are in front of someone who you're dating, for example, and you're wondering whether that person should get a second date, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. That really is making life so much easier for me, because somebody can have all the money and fame and success, but if they're in front of me and I don't feel their frequency, energy, and vibration on a certain level, it's just a no-go. That's really the thing that I've learned the most, is just how to listen for that and really understand life through that lens. And it made everything better as soon as I started doing that.
Everything you just said reminds me of just the keys on the piano, and certain notes together play chords that are pleasing to your own individual ear. And if we start to look at the people we surround ourselves as, we're creating chords that feel good and resonate within our heart and our body. It doesn't mean they're a bad person or that a lower vibration is detrimental. It's just not your tone, and that's okay. And not needing to, I should have a high C, right? Or a traditional chord, versus looking at some of these Middle Eastern or Indian instruments and to start to explore what is sound within this body. And like you said, there's nothing like live sound.
Yeah.
And to express your own live sound. So for anyone that's listening, that's watching, reach out to Quddus. So let's talk about how they can get in touch with you, because for me, I wouldn't be who and how I am without music. And that has been, it's actually a necessity, not just for healing, but for me to be healthy, to heal thy body, I must emote through sound and vibration.
Yeah.
And it's something I didn't understand, and I had thyroid issues because of it. And so when I tell y'all listening, like, sound is everything, and the resonance and the vibration. So how can people get in touch with you that are like, yes, sound, say less, here's my credit card, like, let's go, Quddus.
Yeah. So we have a website, soundsanctuary.org, and we have Instagram at Sound Sanctuary. And so come find us there. There's a community of practitioners. We got immersions if you want to come and develop in person and get your hands on these singing bowls and the gongs and maybe even serve other people in this way. It is a very fulfilling path.
Y'all, I'm going to tell you that you need to go in person, wherever it is or wherever he's going. When it comes to sound, it's not something you can just learn solely on Zoom. You can maybe learn some practicum and some things, but really go be in person, feel it, and not just listening with your ears, listening with the cells of water in your body, the blood, the bones, your ancestors, your epigenetic encoding, your awakenings that happen when you give yourself permission to hear with your whole body, with your whole heart, with your whole soul. So until next time, this is the Psychedelic Coach. This is my dear friend Quddus, that we keep catching each other in new iterations, and I'm excited to see where else we go from here.
Yeah, so great being on this podcast with you. So happy we did this.